every time we dropped a bomb, there was a possibility that a lot of people would be killed. But our targets were not people. They were bridges, railroads, factories, things that would bring the war to an end sooner if they were destroyed.
In 1945, Russell Dupe was a sergeant in the United States 8th Air Force and a member of a B-17 bomber crew stationed in England. Today, an industrial purchasing agent, he lives with his wife and son in Southern California.
We pilots were a special breed. We did not only fly to destroy. We flew because we loved it. I was always happy when I saw parachutes come out of an enemy plane that had been hit, because then I knew that everybody was safe.
Wilhelm Herget was an ace Luftwaffe fighter pilot in 1945 with over 80 kills to his credit. He lives today in Stuttgart, Germany, where he owns and operates a printing plant. In the skies over Germany during the final months of the war, the lives of Russell Dupe and Wilhelm Herget came together for a brief moment. Two fighting men, one American, one German, relived that moment in history. In January 1943, the Allied leaders assign a top role to air bombing. The terrors of sky warfare, first used by Germans, are now to be turned on Germany. The Allies are prepared to drop 2 million tons of high explosive on strategic targets. Germany is to be bombed into submission. The Americans flying by day and the British by night are organized into the combined bomber offensive. Their orders are to destroy the Luftwaffe in the air and on the ground. Until this objective is achieved, the planned invasion of Europe cannot be undertaken. Rugged and dependable B-17s are the mainstays of the American air fleets. Operating at altitudes of 25,000 feet, they are well able to hit most targets in Germany. With each passing week, the airstrikes gather momentum as more crews and bombers are sent off by day and by night from England. One American airman joining these attacks is Corporal Russell Dupe.
We have had two different briefings, and we've been told what our target is and the things to watch out for. We seldom go to Berlin or any other target in a straight line. Also, we try to alert as much of Germany as possible to keep them guessing as to what our target is going to be. As we reach the continent, a feeling of tension begins to mount. It will not leave us until we return to home base. When you see flak for the first time, do you realize that the enemy is really shooting at you?
One of the airmen now defending German skies is the Luftwaffe ace, Major Wilhelm Herget.
I don't have to tell you that we get slightly tense waiting for our orders. When the standby order comes through, we know that in 15 minutes we will take off. We all feel kind of weak in our knees, but it is understandable. Fighting is hard business. I climb up to 6,500 meters. Has the pilot seen me or not? I fired the plane at a very short distance. I get caught in the spin of it and begin to roll down. At 2,000 meters, I managed to catch myself.
The results of the American daylight air offensive in Europe have proved discouraging to Allied planners. The cost has been high. In some raids, more than 20% of the flying fortresses are lost.
Very dangerous, is it painful?
No, it's not painful.
Your name is Philip J. Gibbons.
Yes, sir.
Gibbons, G-E-B-B-U-N-S. Are you wounded?
Twisted ankle.
Twisted ankle, but that's all. You can walk after all.
Yes.
first trip here today. Can you give us a story on what you ran into right around the target or any enemy defenses?
Well, Captain, we approached the target over the river, practically on the target, where we ran into quite a bit of flak, dropped our bombs. Looked like we did a lot of good, and did a hell of a lot of good. Well, we were attacked by either some 190s or 109Es. Three of them in formation, white. They dove down on us and then swooped up under. And West, the ball turret.
Who's West, this boy here?
Yes, he's my ball turret man. He knocked one of them off, at least one, I'm pretty sure.
1944 has opened with furious air assaults on the Luftwaffe forces. But now with new Mustang and Thunderbolt fighters arriving in increasing numbers, daylight bombing becomes practical. The Americans at last have a powerful escort plane capable of protecting bombers to and from their targets. By spring, the campaign has risen in crescendo with massive blows at the German aircraft industry. The Luftwaffe is finding it increasingly difficult to deal with the number and frequency of these attacks. They have lost hundreds of first-line defense fighters. Pilots are ordered into the air only when vitally important targets are threatened. By June, the Luftwaffe is limping badly, and the capacity of German airmen to interfere with Allied operations is drastically curtailed. Allied mastery of the air over Normandy is so complete that on the eve of D-Day, Eisenhower can tell his troops, "You needn't worry about the air. If you see a plane, it will be ours."
It's a clear day, so we'll bomb intermittently. One button, one bomb. Salvo is when every bomb in a bomb bay goes at once. But today we drop bombs so they hit every 50 feet or so. They are thermite bombs, which break into large hot clusters, hot enough to burn right through steel. On the way back, I see 5 or 6 of our previous target areas. Every town is knocked right out of the war, completely covered with craters.
In September, top priority is given to 11th hour retaliatory measures. The V2 was launched against England. Traveling faster than sound, the bomb-carrying rockets cannot be stopped by anti-aircraft guns or fighter planes. But Londoners by now have grown accustomed to Hitler's scare tactics and prove once more they can take it. Their view of the buzz bomb is, you'll always hear the one that's missed you, but never the one that's hit you. But the Luftwaffe's chief hope lies in the accelerated production of another weapon, the first jet plane, the revolutionary Messerschmitt 262. The few models that are operational prove what a potent threat they can be to the Allies, who have nothing to match them. German underground factories are set up to produce 1,000 a month. The cream of the Luftwaffe pilots are gathered together to fly them.
The rockets enable us to take off from a relatively small runway. The plane is airborne after only 1,200 meters, and the landing gears roll in before you know it. The average cruising speed is 900 kilometers, and with a little bit more pressure, it can be brought to the speed of sound. It is unbelievable. We feel again that Germany is the master of the air.
December 1944. In the air, the combined bomber forces have established almost complete air superiority. The German leaders are forced to desperate expedients. Factories providing certain types of war goods are dispersed to the country or relocated underground in bomb-proof shelters. The breakdown of Germany's industrial output is a grim omen for the Luftwaffe. The production of jet fighters and other aircraft is slowed to a standstill. Despite the danger of these setbacks, the Luftwaffe continues to resist. On New Year's Day, German air units assembled for a major offensive against Allied airfields on the continent. Of Allied planes are destroyed or severely damaged. It has been a brave but hopeless effort, for the Allied air offensive continues to increase its power to destroy. The air war reaches a peak of intensity. No city, however small, is safe from destruction. The thin line that has separated selective bombing from area or indiscriminate bombing has almost disappeared.
We fly in an easterly direction at approximately 3,000 meters. Suddenly, I see a large point moving towards Frankfurt. I am shaken. I have never seen so many 4-engine bombers flying over Germany. Poor city of Frankfurt.
Schwarze Armada A 2964, Höhe 6000 Meter, Höhe 6000 Meter. Achtung, Achtung, Siegfried 5, Siegfried 5.
By night and by day, German civilians are feeling the full impact of modern war. 1.5 million tons of bombs have been dropped on Germany. 250,000 people have been killed as a result of the raids, and at least 500,000 buildings totally destroyed. Germany is now living in its own cellars. Despite the devastation the endless tons of bombs bring to their cities, the Germans manage to keep home morale high. Our walls may crumble, but never our hearts, is the slogan planted over the rubble.
Why are we fighting? We are fighting for our country, but what are we gaining? all have to forget certain things in each country when this war is over. And we will forget. One day we will shake hands across the border, and there won't be another war again. We will shake hands and try to understand one another.
Allied raids take place in April 1945. There are no big targets left. If victory in the air is complete, the war on the ground is destined to continue a while longer. The collapse of the Third Reich is assured. Its economy is in shambles. Its armed forces destitute and immobilized. Its industry out of commission.
In this pub, minding our own business, when suddenly there's an announcement on the radio. VE Day has just been declared. I feel sort of relieved to know that I'll never have to fly another mission. We are out of it. That part of the war is over.
Herget will make 655 flights before being captured by the British in May 1945. Later, he will return to Germany and his ruined printing factory in Stuttgart. Sergeant Russell Dupe will be flown to the United States shortly after VE Day. He will be discharged in Florida in the fall of 1945, and then will return to his native Kansas. Germany is now a scarred landscape of ruined cities. Berlin, Hamburg, Dresden, Cologne, Frankfurt, Bremen, Mannheim, and a litany of others.
The harder the war became, the more the crew became welded together. This comradeship still exists among us after so many years and will probably last as long as we live.
Wilhelm Spar was an officer on a German U-boat during World War II. Today a resident of Hamburg, he is the managing director of a sailing magazine and vice president of the U-Boat Veterans Association. Basil Bleck was an anti-submarine officer on convoy escort duty in the Atlantic. Today an information officer for the British consul, he is presently on duty in the United States.
The battle for England's lifeline was eventually won by suppressing the U-boat. But it was so long, so dreary, so tedious, and one's part was really very small.
In the danger-filled Atlantic, the lives of Lieutenant Spar and Lieutenant Bleck crossed. Two fighting men, one German, one Englishman, relive that moment in history. the 3rd, 1939. The British passenger liner Athenia, torpedoed by a German U-boat, sinks off the North Irish coast. Of her 1,450 passengers, many in flight from the European war zones, 120 perish. The sinking of the Athenia underlines a brutal fact. Although World War II is but a few hours old, the Battle of the Atlantic has begun. Because German naval strength is inferior to that of the British, heavy reliance is placed on the effectiveness of the Unterseeboot, the deadly U-boat. From the beginning, the objectives are clear to the German High Command. England, an island nation dependent on her shipping for survival, must be strangled into submission. Her lifeline severed and her sea power destroyed. The British Admiralty, gravely alarmed by the tremendous shipping losses, has resorted to various protective measures. Shipping is rerouted, sailings are made in convoys, new detection devices are developed, and top priority is given to the production of escort vessels. On board a corvette, HMS Bassett is a specialist in submarine detection. 33-year-old Lieutenant Basil Bleck.
When the convoy arrives in Halifax, we generally have a week, possibly 10 days off. There is very little to do. We have parties when we hash over what has happened, where each has been, why so-and-so got lost or off course, and one thing and another of that sort. There is always a feeling of intense depression when the convoy starts off. The captains of all the escort ships are told the course the convoys will sail and the evasive actions to be taken. Some of the convoys are terribly slow, down to about 6 knots, and one wonders if we will ever see land again. The trip just seems to go on and on and on. Submarine warfare is a listening warfare. We are allowed to break radio silence only when we make what is called an enemy sighting report, when we have actually come in contact with the enemy. This quiet is probably one of the worst things for the men, being shut off from the world, of constantly having to listen, of having to try and detect the enemy. Luftwaffe takes its toll of the convoys as they near England after a long, precarious voyage. We are nearly always spotted, if not attacked. The anti-aircraft cruiser in the convoy tries to fight them off, but quite a number of the ships are hit.
By the summer of 1940, German bomber attacks on shipping turned the English Channel into a death trap. But it is the U-boat alone that in 10 months accounts for more than 400 British and neutral vessels, the equivalent of over 1 million tons of merchant shipping. By December, U-boats have claimed another 300 Allied ships at a cost to Germany of only 24 submarines.
Frequently, after an attack, we are detached to look for survivors. We drop scramble nets down our sides and steam very gently into the area, moving backwards and forwards over the wreckage. Looking for survivors is very depressing. One sees men drowning, and it is too late for help. We are forbidden to put off small boats, and we aren't allowed to stop because we'll present a sitting target. The survivors come alongside, sometimes in boats, sometimes swimming, and then up the side of the ship on these nets.
The year 1941 opens with a series of violent storms at sea. Hitler announces to the Reichstag, in the spring our U-boat war will be renewed, and Britain will notice that we have not been sleeping. German submarine production is 10 boats a month, with major emphasis on Type 7, a 700-tonner. She carries 12 torpedoes, 42 crew members, and can cruise 6,500 nautical miles. The U-47, already famous for sinking the British battleship Royal Oak, is under the command of Lieutenant Prime. Aboard is a young navigator, Lieutenant Wilhelm Spar.
The living conditions are very cramped. We have a great deal of equipment on board. The majority of torpedoes are stored in the bow or in the afterdeck. The men literally sleep on torpedoes. The crew of a German U-boat consists solely of volunteers, and we are proud of this fact. If a U-boat crew is new and inexperienced, the sinking of an enemy vessel is usually very depressing. One starts to think about the meaning of war, but one gets used to a lot of things, even to destruction. Possible to help the crew of a sunken vessel without endangering our own men, we serve us. Lifeboats are put out and survivors are rescued and helped into life rafts. We furnish them with water, food, cigarettes and rum, and we give first aid to the wounded. If possible, we radio a neutral ship in the area. Sometimes we even manage to tow whole crews in their rafts. All this can only take place if the enemy defense does not bother us.
Admiral Karl Dönitz is in command of the German undersea fleet. As the enemy's defense measures strengthen, he devises new battle tactics. He orders the U-boats to extend their searches beyond England's western approaches, to seek out and attack convoys along the Atlantic shipping routes. The first U-boat to sight a convoy radios in the position and course. U-boats in the vicinity rendezvous ahead at a designated point. Then, under cover of darkness, the assembled U-boats close in for the kill. It is the heyday of Die Rudel tactic, the so-called wolf pack technique. As 1941 draws to a close, the submarine can claim another 500 merchant ships sunk in the North Atlantic. The cost to Germany during this year of highly successful hunting, 35 U-boats. Until now, the Germans have been careful to avoid any incidents that would bring the United States more actively into the war. But suddenly, in December of 1941, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. 4 days later, Germany declares war on the United States. The Battle of the Atlantic enters a new and decisive phase. With America's entry into the war, maritime construction soars. Shipyards across the nation turn to the task of creating the largest and most powerful merchant fleet the world has ever known. In spite of this all-out effort, the number of ships being sunk by U-boats is still more than the United States can replace. Lone oil tankers sailing in the heavily populated sea lanes off the North American coast are particularly attractive targets. Admiral Dönitz comments, "Our submarines are operating inshore along the coast of the United States, so that bathers and sometimes entire coastal cities are witnesses to blazing tankers and the drama of war." By the spring of 1942, a coastal convoy system is in effect along the Atlantic seaboard. Protective air cover, along with other defensive measures, forces the U-boats to retire once again to the North and Mid-Atlantic. The great fleets of merchant and troop ships are guided by escorts fitted with sonar and anti-submarine weapons. The carefully regulated formations move at a speed dictated by that of the slowest ship. The zigzag course adds many extra days to the 2 weeks or more at sea. At night, the blacked out and silent ships are a menace to one another, for there is always the danger of collision. Bad weather is another enemy of the convoy. The unpredictable Atlantic is often as deadly as the unseen U-boat below.
Our principal preoccupation is to keep the convoy together. In heavy weather, an attack will not develop, as U-boats sit out storms. It is very rough, very cruel, very uncomfortable. One's legs are bruised from the thigh down because we are continually banging against things, getting thrown this way and that. senior convoy officer on board a destroyer. We receive messages from him saying that a U-boat pack is lying in a certain area. 2 or 3 of the escort ships are detached and sent to engage the U-boats before they can develop their tactics. We send out a signal and get an echo back. As we move into the attack, the pings shorten. We can always tell by the attack pattern if the contact is near. Explosions block out the echo completely. One always thinks at this moment that one has hit the submarine. But we cannot be credited with a hit unless we can turn up visual evidence, floating debris or oil slicks. One can spot whether the U-boat man is a good man or not by the evasive action he takes. We try to pick up the echo again, but we do not.
In the evening, we surface. We have escaped our guard. Ah, but how our poor boat looks. Our compasses do not work. Only by means of the polar star can we make out our directions. Outside Bordeaux, we come across an enemy ship. We submerge and make everything ready for the attack. The enemy comes closer. In our thoughts, we have already sunk the ship. It is like a drill. The ship is in perfect position, and we let our torpedo go. I wait and wait. Nothing happens. It is a circle goer. It is our own torpedo coming back at us. Our torpedo goes right over our heads. The dear Lord has put his big thumb between us and the torpedo. We come to periscope depth. The enemy ship is continuing on its way. We are relieved that all is well. We could attack the ship with our deck guns, but we decide not to. We have lost the spirit.
Strain that comes from spending many weeks at sea under crowded and tense conditions is relieved only when port is reached. There, U-boat crews are treated as heroes and given special consideration. Convoy escorts are strengthened by baby flat tops, new explosives, new types of sonar, Hydrophones, hedgehogs, and torpedoes all contribute to the mounting total of anti-submarine measures. Still, U-boat successes reached the highest peak of the war in November 1942. 117 Allied ships are sent to the bottom. It is a figure which conceals the fact that more U-boats are being destroyed than ever before. In February of 1943, the British used a new radar for the first time. It operates on a wavelength of 20 centimeters, which German apparatus cannot detect. By day and by night, unsuspecting submarines are pinpointed and attacked by an enemy they cannot see before it is too late. By June, Allied strength with revolutionary scientific methods has sealed the fate of the U-boat. Of the 235 submarines in action, 84 have been destroyed in the last 3 months. Along with the increase in German losses has been a corresponding drop in Allied sinkings. The hunter has, at last, become the hunted. In 1944, Lieutenant Wilhelm Spar is transferred to Danzig as a technical advisor in the construction of a more powerful type of U-boat. The war's end will find him in a Hamburg hospital. In the winter of 1943, Lieutenant Basil Bleck is assigned to the staff of General de Gaulle's Free French Forces in London. Later, he is transferred to New York as a naval liaison officer. "1943 marked the turning point in the Battle of the Atlantic. It was then that the U-boat lost the initiative. Yet many months would pass before peace would return to the neutral sea.